Funding for Inner Compass is provided by Calvin College.
The life that's unfolding,
the world that awaits,
gifts that are yours to explore,
and God's to use.
It's all happening here at Calvin.
Welcome to Inner Compass. I'm Karen Saupe. If we live in Michigan orchard country, why are we buying apples from Washington? And is that cheap pair of sneakers really a better price when its lifespan is a third of the more expensive pair? Our guest today recommends a new way of looking at how we apply our resources and what we get in return. Join us on Inner Compass.
From the campus of Calvin College, this is Inner Compass, exploring how people use faith and ethics to guide them through critical issues of today.
My guest today is Michael Shuman, author of the book, The Small-Mart Revolution, How Local Businesses Are Beating the Global Competition. One of his many projects is the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, which has 37 local business networks in North America with more than 12,000 members. You can learn more at livingeconomies.org. Welcome, Michael.
Nice to be here.
The big box stores, big chain stores, and it's not just stores, but Walmart, that sort of place, they have amazing low prices. They have good bargains. Why are they not so great for us?
Well, in some ways they are great for us. I mean, they do deliver some cheap goods some of the time. The mistake we make is in thinking that they always deliver the cheapest goods all the time. And in fact, in Maine, where my business, the Training and Development Corporation, is based, we do an annual survey of pharmaceuticals and have found that actually chain pharmaceuticals are more expensive than locally sold pharmaceuticals, so with Walmart sort of falling in the middle of the pack. And that's information that people need to have.
Need to know. That's surprising because the story has always been that the bigger companies have more buying power and can afford to sell at lower prices.
And what happens in the case of the pharmaceuticals is that local pharmacies are part of a national producer cooperative that enables them to buy in bulk and thereby be competitive. It's the same thing with hardware. The True Value hardware stores, Ace hardware stores, are local stores but are part of a national producer cooperative that are able to go out there, buy in bulk, and pass along those discounts to the consumers. The downside of chain stores is that every dollar you spend at a chain store, virtually all of it gets sucked out of the community. Whereas a dollar that goes into a local business largely will stay inside the community. And I'll give you a very specific example of this. There was a wonderful study done in Austin, Texas about 3 years ago, and it was looking at the relative impact of $100 spent at a Borders bookstore versus 2 local bookstores. $100 spent at the Borders led to $13 remaining in the local economy. $100 spent at the 2 local bookstores led to $45 staying in the economy. So roughly speaking, for every dollar you spent at the local bookstore, you got 3 times the tax benefits, 3 times the income and wealth benefits, 3 times the labor and the jobs benefits. So we're not talking small potatoes here.
Okay, and so it's not, when you say the money stays in the community, it's not just even that it gets spent in other local businesses, but that all kinds of sort of background benefits occur to the local economy, right?
Well, you know, the foundation for prosperity for a community is what we economists call the economic multiplier. And what that means is that if I go to a local grocery store and spend $1 there, that they may buy some local produce from a farmer, and that farmer spends money on local utilities, and the more time that dollar circulates in the community, the faster it circulates without any leakage, the more income, wealth, and jobs. And what happens is that in a local business, every time you spend locally, that multiplier is served and becomes more intense because local businesses spend more money locally. Whereas when you spend that money at a chain store, say spend it at Walmart, 90+ cents of that will go off to Bentonville, Arkansas.
Okay. Even when, I mean, a lot of the big box stores talk about community involvement. They sometimes fund grants or support the local communities, and a lot of the big boxes have gone out of their way to do that, to improve their image.
Well, you know, there's no question that big boxes and all kinds of companies of all sizes are engaged in charity. Mm-hmm. The truth is, though, that empirically we know that local businesses give relatively more charity generally. And also because that charity is locally focused, that too has a multiplier impact that the contributions from the box stores does not have.
Sure. And of course, so far we've talked about economic benefits. There have to be kind of community involvement benefits in terms of investment in your own community, personal investment in your community, right?
Yes. And really, you know, when you think about what are some of the cutting edge theories about community development, well, one of them, for example, is smart growth. The idea that we should do more things with existing parcels of land rather than grind up farms and other green spaces. If you think about it, you can't have a lot of big smokestack, you know, Ford, Chrysler kinds of businesses and have smart growth. Smart growth requires smaller businesses, and they tend to be locally owned. Or give you another example. Richard Florida, 2 years ago, came out with a book called The Rise of the Creative Class. And what he was arguing is that the most successful communities these days are those that attract the best and brightest and hold on to them. Right. And you know, one of the ways that communities do that is that they are weird, they're special, they're creative. So Austin has a campaign for its local businesses called Keep Austin Weird.
I thought that was great, yeah.
And you know, if you think about it, no one goes to Houston as a tourist. You may have
right.
relatives in Houston, but you don't go there because everything is chain stores.
Sure.
So a community that is made up largely of familiar chain businesses, of the jobs that are based on assembly lines, as opposed to an entrepreneurial economy where there's lots of opportunities and all kinds of businesses. You can see that the entrepreneurial society is going to be inherently more creative, more attractive.
More interesting place to visit and to be part of. But it's expensive. I'm pretty idealistic about wanting to support my local economy, and in fits and spurts I'll make that effort. And if I can buy something locally and avoid having to go into a big box, I'll do it usually. Now, when I'm spending money on behalf of, say, a church organization, I want my dollars to go as far as they possibly can. I feel that it's good stewardship to look for the lowest prices and best quality I can find. So I'm more likely to go into a big chain store. I've talked about this on this show before. I work at a summer camp, and when I'm purchasing things for that camp, I will almost always go to Walmart. At the same time, after I read your book, I began to realize that our camp is in some financial trouble, partly because the local economy is so weak that people can no longer afford to send their kids to camp. What you seem to be saying is that I might be, in saving that little amount of money immediately, I may actually be costing my camp and my organization a lot more money.
Yes, I mean, I think you can. There's two different arguments here that I think are both important. One is that I think you can justify spending a little bit more money on a local good or service because having a healthy community is why you're there. It's what your life is all about, is supporting that community. But the more important point is, and I think this appeals to a broader swath of people, that is, if you shop smart, you are going to spend more money locally and you're going to save money. And I want to give you a couple of examples of how that's true. You know, one of the ways we get ourselves in a bind in this discussion is that we focus exclusively on the big box stores and on retail. And it turns out that retail is one of the areas of the economy where chain stores have done very well in the last 10 years, and small business has suffered. But we forget that retail is only 7% of the U.S. economy. In the other 93%, there has been gigantic success in financial sectors, small-scale manufacturing, small-scale service businesses, transportation systems, small-scale utilities. And when you start looking at where your money is really going, I would bet your single biggest expenditure is on your mortgage.
Yes.
So, and it's true for me. And I just took the major step of moving my mortgage to a local credit union. because I discovered that my local credit union had a slightly lower charge on interest than the big bank, Bank of America, that I previously had my mortgage in.
So it really was a better deal. You weren't just doing this for idealistic reasons. It was good business for you.
And empirically, we know that local banks and credit unions, by and large, are slightly more competitive than the big banks. To give you another example, probably another big expenditure item you have is energy, whether it's your utilities or the gasoline bill that you have. The Rocky Mountain Institute has calculated that the typical American household could probably put $3,000 a year back into its pocket just by taking very cost-effective energy efficiency measures, weatherization, replacement of inefficient appliances, slight improvement in your car and in the gasoline consumption. And if you did those simple things, again, you're localizing those dollars because they're not going out to outside producers of energy,
well, they're
and
not
you're
going
saving
anywhere.
money.
If I replaced a lot of my light bulbs about a year ago, realizing that would pay for itself, presumably in a year or so. So that seems great, but that's money that I'm not spending at all. How's that going into the local economy?
Because necessarily most of your money, most of what your expenditure is anyway, is locally. So if I put more money in your pocket, I, by definition, am I going to be boosting my local economy.
Okay. You have two characters in your book, Tina and Lois. They're both acronyms. Can you explain those? Yeah.
Tina comes from Maggie Thatcher's invocation, "There is no alternative to the global economy," T-I-N-A. And I begin the book by talking about the relationship between her and another woman's name that I made up, Lois, which stands for Locally Owned and Import Substituting Development, or essentially the alternative. And Tina has really been the archetype that most economic developers in this country have followed. And I try to point out that the assumptions of Tina, that the only way you can have a prosperous economy is by drawing in big global companies and everything else takes care of itself, is fundamentally wrong.
Well, and so let me ask you about that. The obvious reasoning for that is that a big corporation is going to bring lots and lots of jobs. Michigan is trying very hard to attract businesses. Why attract 7 tiny ones if you can attract one great big one that'll hire even more people? So where's the fallacy in that?
The fallacy is that the same dollars, were they spent on developing local businesses, could probably produce more jobs in more diverse businesses than that big chunk of money that went for the flashy page 1 deal.
They have so many jobs that they can always be leveraging for better deals, or they'll go elsewhere. They've got so many choices, right?
That's right. And the problem in economic development is that we have no idea what kinds of local jobs could be induced with a lesser sum of money. I mean, my recommendation to any community, I know Michigan, has a lot of discussion about the next chunk of money they're going to put out to lure someone in. As soon as you have a deal in your mind, say for, $250,000 a job, just stop for 3 months and do an RFP, a request for proposals, to local businesses and see what they could put on the table for, say, $200,000 a job.
So maybe we're not working hard enough to encourage those. We do. I mean, incentives are out there, right?
The incentives are out there. It's not that we're not working hard enough to encourage the local businesses to come forward with these proposals. We're not working at all to do it. And so economic development is, as I call it in the book, a kind of elephant-mouse casserole. The rhetoric is, we serve Lois and Tina equally. But at the end of the day, Tina is this gigantic elephant. So yes, we serve the elephant with all of our tax abatements. And then we have these itsy-bitsy kinds of incubator programs and entrepreneurship programs for the small businesses. And in dollar terms, 99.9% of the money went to Tina. So we have to get rid of that disadvantage that faces local small business. Let me put it in more specific terms, which is that every single year it's estimated that state and local governments are putting $50 billion into business attraction. That is a disincentive to the success of local small business.
Why is that?
Because it is money that goes to the non-local business that improves their competitive edge over the locals.
Okay. So if we put those same resources into not attracting local businesses because they're already there, but encouraging them,
Well, I frankly think we don't need the incentives at all. I think the best thing for economic development would be largely to abolish most of the profession. If you simply got rid of most of this pork business out there, first of all, it cleans up politics because a lot of corruption is built around the pork. But the second thing is it does begin to levelize the playing field and puts a lot of money back in the pockets of taxpayers who I think actually will spend that money locally. I think that the things that we need to do alternatively for economic development are not that expensive. For example, encouraging people to buy local, to know what stores are local or what products are local, or developing networks of local businesses like flexible manufacturing networks. So we talked earlier about the producer cooperatives, trying to get more businesses into these producer cooperatives.
Right.
These are things that make money once you start doing them, so they don't cost a lot except to get them up and running.
Let me ask for a minute, how are those local co-ops, or say Ace Hardware is an example of this, that these are independently owned business people who partner with others. How is that different from having a franchise of, say, a fast food chain store where you own the franchise locally?
The difference, well, franchise is complicated because franchise describes a vast continuum that could be a lot of control locally to no control at all. But where I sort of, in my mind, draw a distinction is, at the end of the day, can you decide what you're selling and where you're going to get your products and what kind of advertising you do? How much control over your business do you have?
Okay.
So if you're a true value hardware store operator, you have total control over that. What the cooperative provides is a tool, it's not a set of requirements.
Okay.
Whereas, if you're a McDonald's franchise and you go to Hamburger U, I mean, everything to the temperature of the fryer grease to, the ruffles on the shirt, I mean, are prescribed by rules.
Right, and you're not going to get any of your supply, or you're not going to get most of your supplies locally.
Right,
So
hardly any at all.
All right. A different question, I've told you, I make some efforts to shop locally. I'm not very consistent about that. And I'm not very consistent about living my life sort of coherently. My mother lives, within walking distance of a Walmart. She sort of knows, and lives in a small town that 20 years ago was completely personal, completely individual. I've had such fascinating experiences there where I worked in a drugstore in college, and when we ran out of something, we'd go to the competitor drugstore to borrow whatever we needed, knowing they'd do the same for us. Those kinds of relationships existed. If you needed something after hours, you went and pounded on the glass, and the lady who owned the store would come open it and let you in and take care of you. But while everyone in that small town mourns the loss of that atmosphere, they're all parked at the big box because it's easier, and I think because it seems hopeless. This is what I want to ask you about. Are my little dents going to make any difference? Are my little efforts even worth making, or does this require a vast revolution in the way everyone shops and thinks?
I don't think it will, because I think that the big boxes have their kind of Napoleonic Waterloo coming. Oil prices are getting higher. I don't see any direction they're going to go. I mean, yeah, we're in a little downward spike right now. As oil prices get higher, that means that all of that investment in China that Walmart has put there, and then the shipping of 10 or 15,000 miles to bring those goods back to the United States, even if the labor were free, that's not going to be a competitive model anymore. And local production for local consumption is going to be a lot more effective. So what I think, the way that I would think about what you're doing is you are keeping alive a structure of business that the competitive future belongs to. And I believe that, we had a lot of very bad local businesses. Many of them went out of business over the last 10 years. The Business Alliance for Local Living Economies that you mentioned at the top of our discussion, BALE, has a mission of trying to weave networks of these businesses together so that they can improve one another's competitiveness. And I think that, there's a healthy cycle here, that you don't have to change all of your consumption habits, but if you just conscientiously, say, maybe I can get, 1 out of 10 things a week locally.
That's enough to begin to make a difference.
That begins to create a cycle where these things then become more competitive.
Do you think the Tinas are going to start to do more local purchasing? I know some have, that the groceries will get their goods locally. It sounds as if it's going to make economic advantage to do so. Would that be enough? If the Tinas were all getting their supplies locally, would that be enough to improve the economy or the big stores? Or do we still need those usually tiny local businesses?
Well, local is not a you're in, you're out. And I think that's one of the things that your question begins to look at, which is what are the many degrees of local? So ideally, the kind of home run for your economy is where it's a locally sold good that was produced locally using local talent and local labor.
Because then the money just continues to circulate in all kinds of ways inside the local economy.
And chances are very good that you're not going to get that often. So instead, what you're going to get is the second best thing. It's a local store selling a non-local good, or it's a non-local store that maybe is selling a local good. So I think, when the big boxes begin to sell local stuff, that's great. And I know Walmart is thinking about that. They're listening to some of the critics. I think it's going to be a problem for them, because I think at the end of the day, people like me and you will still look for that smaller producer that you have that personal relationship with it. Right. So it's more than price that's driving us.
That's the thing that I think is interesting, is that it's a culture. It's about the social atmosphere of where you're stopping to shop and who you talk to there. Your book offers lots and lots of examples of models where this is working successfully.
The biggest advice is that if you are or a local business proprietor, you should try to become a part of this business alliance, because working together with other small businesses, you will find opportunities for competitiveness that you cannot find on your own. And if the Chambers of Commerce, if the National Federation of Independent Business, if they were doing their jobs properly, this would be unnecessary. But for complicated reasons, they more represent big business than small business. The second thing is, as a consumer, just try to buy local first. And that's the rallying cry, local first. It's not saying buy local at all costs. Right. It's not saying buy local at all times, but particularly at the holiday season. If you can think about what are some ways that you could get some gifts that really honor things that are really made in the community and introduce the people you love to those things.
Which is fun anyway, to buy Christmas gifts that are made by people you know.
And
cool.
I know that the people who are launching the Local First campaign here in Grand Rapids actually are thinking about doing a gift card that would be out next Christmas. That would encourage people to buy at local stores. Right. It would be a gift certificate usable at a couple of hundred businesses. And I should also mention, this is another success story. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, about 500 businesses in this 100,000 person community are members of a buy local card that was launched by a local bank. And every time you use this card at a local business, you get loyalty points that give you discounts for further purchases at that bank.
That's great.
And they're also going to give it a gift card capability next year.
Super.
So I think, what's interesting about many of these tools is that these themselves are businesses. So a producer co-op is a business.
Right.
A gift card or a buy local card is a business. So that's why I think, it's very important to move away from this sort of pork for Tina mentality and think about, we want to create an entrepreneurial society, and we want to model that entrepreneurial society by creating public policies that encourage that kind of entrepreneurial behavior.
Sounds as if your ideas really will energize local communities. That's great. Could you say just a word about maybe commitment to local economy versus commitment to encouraging development in third world countries?
Yes. Yeah, and there was an interesting piece in the Christian Science Monitor over the summer that raised the question, well, if you encourage people to buy all their, say bananas locally from a local greenhouse, that means that lots of people who pick those bananas in the third world are going to suffer. And I think it's not a very smart argument, because at the end of the day, the percentage of a dollar that goes to bananas that winds up in the pocket of that banana picker in a third world country is a fraction of a penny. It is a very inefficient anti-poverty program. My belief is that the most important thing to do in fighting poverty is to create islands of self-reliance, of greater self-reliance everywhere in the world. So everything that you do in Grand Rapids to model, for example, a self-reliant food system with farmers who are growing locally, cost competitively in global markets, and leading to self-reliance in food, and give those ideas away, share them worldwide,
if all communities
help other
do that,
people.
we're all fine.
Yeah, then you really are going to be making a dent in world poverty. And I think that we're beginning to see this in self-reliant energy systems, self-reliant housing systems, even small-scale manufacturing. We've got all kinds of models of how to make a local economy cost competitive in many, many goods and services. We just have to share that globally.
Thank you, Michael. My guest today has been Michael Shuman, author of the book, The Small-Mart Revolution, How Local Businesses Are Beating the Global Competition. I'm Karen Saupe. Thank you for watching Inner Compass.
Funding for Inner Compass is provided by Calvin College.
The life that's unfolding,
The world that awaits.
Gifts that are yours to explore.
and God's to use.
It's all happening here at Calvin.